Hey everybody, thanks for joining Analytic Stories. I've got Mike Saxon here. I'm real happy to have him. I'll introduce him in a second. A couple of housekeeping things. It's being recorded, so you'll be able to come back and listen to our brilliant banter as many times as you want. And we're not going to be taking any Q&A, but if you have any questions, you can put them down below the video window, and Mike and I will do our best to answer them after we're done here today. So I'm going to jump right in. Just to let you know, Mike and I have known each other for over 15 years. Our daughters have grown up together. So this is likely to be a very interesting conversation. Outside of the general content, you'll find that we're pretty loose with each other. So it should be a good ride. So Mike, thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure, Lee. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. I think I'm going to start with the most fun question I cooked up for you. So let's jump in here. So now for folks that don't know Mike, once you do get to know him, you'll find out that he really has what I would call the gift for gab. He is a good talker. You would agree, right?
That is what they pay me for. Yes.
Okay, so excellent. Now, so imagine one day you're strolling through downtown Westfield. That's the town that we live in, everybody. And you find a magic lamp. But unfortunately, it's an evil genie that pops out of this lamp and says, Mike, from now on, you can only talk about one thing when it comes to data and analytics. And if you try to talk about anything else, your mouth will stay shut and you will start dancing uncontrollably. Now, the one thing is we definitely don't want to see Mike dancing uncontrollably. So
I have some great video, though, of you dancing uncontrollably at Aaliyah's bat mitzvah.
That is true.
You do a nice Macarena. I just want to put that out there as long as we're having a conversation.
Hey, I'm very proud of that day.
Yes.
So now, remembering the question. So now, what's the one thing that you want to be able to talk about?
Sure. So, this one's easy for me, and I'm a little bit of a broken record when it comes to this. But one of the most common things I say to clients is, what are the actions that you're going to take with this insight? And sometimes that gets modified. It's not just what actions are you going to take, but what actions can you take? Because in my line of work, where I'm talking to clients who want, tell me the insights that are going to get me to a higher ROI and better pricing and whatever else they do, they want to do. It really comes down to, well, what can you do? So I'll give you an example.
I like that.
Yeah. I'll give you a really good example, a really common example. So I do a lot of work with retailers. And retailers will a big, huge thing that retailers talk about is hyper localization. The idea that the way you sell in Union County, New Jersey, and the prices you have and what you stock on the shelves might be very different than what you stock on the shelves in Boston, Massachusetts. Maybe.
Makes sense.
All right, and that you can improve your overall ROI by stocking things in different stores at different prices and whatever. My next question when I have this discussion is, can you actually assort by store? Pause. 2, 3. Well, no. Our assortment system really is based on zones, and we really have to give the same product to all the different zones. Oh, so if I told you that there was a difference, that you should stock this over here, it's not something you could actually do. Well, no, but we'd like to know about it. Great.
Okay.
You really want to pay me to know that? Or, you can't do anything with it.
And then what do they say?
Like, well, that's a good point. So can we do assortment? Can we look at assortment by like store cluster? Sure. What are your trade zones? What are the ways that your logistics operation looks at the world? Let's see if we can find interesting things using that definition. Oh, that makes sense. Okay. So that's what we do.
Yeah, I mean, that touches on a couple of points, this idea of what action do you want to take? What action can you take? I mean, I would say similar, that I'm a broken record, that I always talk about decisions and actions. So when someone says, I want sales data, fill in the blank, right? Whatever you want. Okay. And assuming it's not a problem, that we can get that data, right? The response might be, hey, Mike, not a problem. We can get that data pretty easily. We can even put it in some kind of beautiful visualization. And assuming I do that, what decisions are you trying to make? And ultimately, what actions might you take? And
Right.
it's kind of like the same thing, pause to, right? It's, oh, I'm not sure, right? Or, right? So that's one thing. The other side of that one too is, when it comes to data, is this real-time thing. And you might be hitting this with the retailers, because a lot of people say, well, we want real-time data. And say, okay, well, how often are you going to look at it? Well, every month.
Yeah, there's a huge, huge, huge problem with analysis paralysis, right? I mean, that's that's a very big deal. So yes, I fully, you know, we see that all the time. One of the it's funny, like way back in the old days, like in like the 2000s, I was working with CPG companies, and weekly sales data became a thing.
Mhm.
It ground productivity to a halt because every week became, oh my God, we're up. Oh my God, we're down. Let's do a bunch of bridge charts and do twos to figure out why we're up or why we were down. And then by the time we got through with that analysis, the next week happened. There was no time to
Right.
actually make any decisions. So you
Yeah.
just kept analyzing, 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 and nothing actually got done. So we had companies who were getting weekly data and were like, we're not, we can't, we're not doing anything with that. Can we go back to monthly? And sure. No, seriously.
Yeah. It's true. I think it's this. It's kind of like, I want more and more data, but I haven't even been able to use the data that I've been getting. If
Right.
it's just that more is better for some reason, or that the data is not perfect, which is also a pipe dream, that you'll ever get there, right? You'll never get it perfect, and you'll never have all of it. So
So
you have to do something.
all data is wrong. All data is wrong. Some is useful. That
So say
was
more about that. Talk about
sure.
that some more. That's very interesting.
Right. So all data is wrong. And if we think about it in a practical sense, it's true, right? There's a margin of error around everything. Not only that, but whatever data set you're looking at for like sales or whatever, it doesn't cover exactly what you think it does most of the time, right? It's limited to whatever the source of the data is, right? It, you know, there is always some reason why the data isn't exactly what you need or what, doesn't
Mhm.
represent exactly what you think it does, right? So start that it's wrong. That doesn't mean it's not useful, right? So even though, for example, I can tell you all of the things that are wrong with the apparel data at the company I was working for, right? And why could be wrong and that could be wrong and this could be wrong. If you truly want to understand the seasonality of blue jeans, it's still useful. It's
Mhm.
wrong, but useful because it's still going to give you an idea what the actual seasonality really is. Is it, did you actually sell 720,000 units last week? No, probably not. It was probably not that exact number. Did
Right.
but was next week's higher than last week by a meaningful amount? Yes. Okay, that's useful.
Yeah, I like that idea. That's a great phrase. And it's actually relates to even a lot of what I run into when people are working with data visually, because sometimes you see people and they put they'll put 492,387,622. And I'm like, is that really useful? are you going to do something different because you know it all the way out that far?
Yeah.
And no, right? It's not. But the people, but we want to see the number.
Yeah.
But if you can't, but if you're not going to change your behavior, then it's not valuable. In fact, it actually probably takes away because, like you said, maybe that number is not even the perfectly correct number, let alone something that they can or will act on. And
So the phrase that I use to describe that when I talk to clients is I draw a very big distinction between significant differences and meaningful differences. There are differences that are statistically significant that
mhm.
are not meaningful. So when you're talking about large data sets, differences of very small amounts can be like, you know, literally, significantly different. This is not that. Great. Is it a meaningful difference in what decisions you're going to make? No? Then move on.
Yep. Now, was that trying to get me to do the Macarena?
That was a very obnoxious. So, being old, I need to have a ringtone. So my kids, already cringe at the idea that my phone rings, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like their phones don't ring. But I need my phone to ring because I'm old. And Samsung just happens to have awfully obnoxious ringtones, which makes me
So
very happy. Yeah.
it perks you up. Okay. Well, so this has
Yeah.
been a very good conversation. So I think, yeah. So I want to ask this next question because I think it could tie in nicely, because the fact that that comment you made about data is, the data is probably wrong
All data is wrong.
is wrong. Okay. So this is plays into this idea of uncomfortableness that I like to talk about. So, you've been a consultant, you've seen a lot of things out there, and I know that you don't get uncomfortable easily. I've tried to make you uncomfortable many times, and it's a difficult task. Now, with customers, maybe that's different.
Yeah.
So when you think about your work, that you're doing, like some of the things we've already talked about, can you think about a time maybe that a customer made you uncomfortable, or that you had to put them in an uncomfortable situation and kind of talk through what was that scenario, what did you do, and then kind of how did it turn out?
Sure. Well, I mean, the one time that I made a customer uncomfortable actually was less about data, but it was we've all had this where I had a junior person presenting insights to a more senior person, and the client wasn't liking the presentation. Just it was giving bad news, and the client was shooting the messenger.
Mhm.
And the problem
Many
is that
times.
this is a junior, this is a very senior person shooting at a junior person, and I actually had to stop the meeting, and I sent my junior associate out, and I talked to the client, and I said, listen, um, she doesn't get paid enough for you to talk to her like that. So if you have a problem, you need to talk to me. Um, and she actually at that point apologized. Like she was like, you're right. I'm so that was inappropriate. So that was not comfortable, right?
Yep. Yep.
But the times that I get the most uncomfortable are when I have not, I have, or my team has not delivered the value that we said we would. So I don't mind
Mhm.
asking for money. I don't mind asking for a lot of money. But even if we ask for a little bit of money and we don't deliver on the value, even if we deliver on the project, we said we would deliver X, we delivered X. We did what we said we were going to do, but if they got no value out of it, they made no decisions, and it was just a waste of money. That makes me terribly uncomfortable. Um, we had my favorite example of this. All right, my most recent example of this was probably last year when our fearless orange leader was talking about doing tariffs. And a lot of the retailers that I worked with were very interested in sort of what we thought the impact of the tariffs was going to be. So we dutifully put together a report for which we charged, I think, $10,000. And I sold it to a couple of clients based on what we thought the report was going to be. And it wound up being, to be honest, it was, to use a technical term, dreck. And I had a good client who came to me and said, Mike, you told us nothing. We knew all this. We just spent the money on this and we got no value. I hate that. Hate that. So in a case like that, I gave the money back. Like I said, you would now have a credit towards your next thing. Like I'm not, we'll make you whole.
Yeah. I think both of those examples are very relevant, and thanks for sharing them, because I think they're really critical. The first one, going back to where there was that situation that they didn't like what they were hearing, it's kind of the bottom line. I think that's going to continue to happen as more data becomes available and as more people learn how to analyze it and share what they've learned, right? Not all the news is going to be good. Right. So even things that you've thought maybe were good today because you didn't have enough ability to understand it, you might find out that maybe it's not as good as you thought it was. Right? And that's going to be difficult for people to handle in many different ways, right? And so I think that those situations are going to come out more and more. And I think in that specific example, maybe more at the, say, I don't like to use the word junior, but I'll just use junior to senior delivery, because we're at the stage now where we're able to get the data out more broadly in an organization because of the tools that are available, right? Yep. And so it's not like it's going to be in the past where there were a few people who might have had the data and do the analysis. Now it's really almost anybody who wants to do an analysis can, because they have the tools, and the tools make it easy to get to these either small or very large data sets by basically pushing a button.
Yep.
Right. And ingesting the data. You still have to know how to analyze it, but getting at it is not a problem anymore. And so you're going to have more people that are, not as seasoned, delivering stuff to maybe more senior people. So I think there's some cultural stuff that comes into play that will have to be handled, and it might be ugly at times, like the situation you gave, because it's just an adjustment that organizations are going to have to deal with. Yep. So I don't know if I don't know if you have any thoughts on that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's funny. I know a company right now that I'm working with that does sort of self-serve data like that. And one of the things that companies really get nervous about with self-serve analytics, right, is that there's no one to blame. No one wants to be the person who, says, here's how ugly your baby is. Mm-hmm. And, if you can make that be the outside guy, right? People love it. Like, if I'm the one coming in and saying your baby sucks and they can all pile on me, they like that. But if you're just, the insights guy at the company or person at the company, and now they're going to pile on you, right? That's uncomfortable. So there's these great DIY tools. We have DIY tools, but at the end of the day, for the big analyses, companies don't want DIY. They want an outside third party.
Yeah. And sometimes just even the third party brings different perspective too, let alone the slings and arrows. That's what I always tell my clients. I said, hey, the other thing that a consultant does is we can ask the difficult questions that you can't, because of whatever inside culture, politics, what you want to call it, and we can take those arrows in the back for you. It doesn't bother us,
Yep.
and it's a way to deflect things. So I completely agree.
I do want to respond to Dave Buckman just because, and I know we're not supposed to answer stuff in the chat, but fuck it, Lee.
Go for it.
So Dave Buckman asked, are we using AI to gather data today, and are you concerned about AI taking over your job? And the answer is that AI is pervasive in the data industry, right? And it will take over a lot of jobs. I think it will, right? AI is just, yeah, I mean, it will. I'm not concerned about it in the sense that maybe it's just because I'm fatalistic. Like AI will continue to automate things.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's always will be a limit because at least for the foreseeable future, like the big decisions you will want a human to make. But
Mm-hmm.
pricing is a really, really good example of where AI can make decisions at a speed and detail level that humans can't. And as we talk about things like dynamic pricing, that all has to be AI. I mean, it can't be human driven. So, human pricing managers and things like that will
Yeah, go
become
the
fewer and far
wayside.
between.
Yeah,
So, and
absolutely.
I welcome our robot overlords. So we're fine.
You and I will be dead by then.
Yeah,
So
me anyway. You'll be. Anyway, yeah. As you were
so
saying.
yeah, no, but I think it ties in nicely to this last thing that I'd like to talk about. So in maybe a bit of a strange way. So I want to talk about action because like you said in the beginning about what could you actually do. And so this idea of being replaced by AI and robots, so we better start doing some things better ourselves. And if you could recommend, or what's something maybe you find yourself recommending to your clients that they could do over the course of a short time, say a few weeks even, really get it to a small, something they could change in their behavior or tactics they do that would make a big impact on kind of what they're able to get out of analytics.
Yeah, I excuse me.
Besides buy AI software, buying AI software is not
Bang it.
not an
Yeah,
answer.
not it. No. So it actually goes back to the first thing we talked about, which is understand the limits of what you can actually change, right? What you can actually have an effect on. And that's not just like, oh, what the organization can do, but also cognitively where your organization is at. I've seen new marketing people come into companies and like, we're going to do a segmentation. Is there anyone in your company willing, interested, able to act on a complex buyer segmentation? Is that like a thing that your company could do? Well, no, but we'll show them the value. I'm like,
Mhm.
or don't do that and focus on like other stuff that will have a more immediate impact and your company can actually action on now. Um, so yeah, both things. Like it's understand the level at which your organization moves, like the level of detail words, and focus your analytics, the things that you want to know on the level that of analytics that your organization makes decisions on.
So how do
If
you
you
actually do that though? So in your
Sure.
example, right, this
Yep.
person comes in and says, I want this segmentation, and let's say they're the chief marketing officer, and
Hmm,
they come to the person doing the insights, get me that, get me that, and I'm sitting there going, that doesn't. Why would we do that, right?
right.
How
Exactly.
how can I? How do I help that person
Right.
understand, that maybe even though technically we could do it, right? And we could find someone and pay them to do it, of course. That there's a better route. That so how do we bring those two sides together?
Yep.
To actually move forward, right? And
Right. So what I would typically do is say, okay, you're going to do this segmentation. Who's going to act on it? Oh, well, the merchant team will do whatever. Like, oh, have you talked to them? Maybe we should talk to them. And then you talk to the merchant team and say, so what are the levers you can pull and push? Well, we can pull and push this and this. So if I told you about X, Y, and Z, could you action on that? No, not really. These are I pick things up and I put them down. So great. And then you turn to your insights person or whatever, and you say, so what have we learned? We've learned, these are the things that he or she can work on. Let's focus on that. And that usually gets people to the right place.
So it's almost like you have to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No.
So it seems like you have to really think down the line, where a lot of people are just like, I'll get the data, I know that somewhere in the haystack, I call it it's the way we work today, a lot of it's like needle in the haystack. Right, especially when you talk about self-service, it's like, let me in, get me all the data, right? Whatever that really means, right? And then I'll go in and I'll find something, which is really not likely. But if you did, what would you even maybe do with it? You haven't planned for that yet. And there's many routes, right? Because if you don't think about what you're going to find, and you don't know, if I find it, what would I do? And haven't thought about it. Either one, you may not be able to act on it, because you might be like, well, I found this. Guess what? Either nobody cares, or we don't have the things in place to do anything about it.
Yep.
Right. So that's a huge issue that people are. So how do we? I'm trying to think about, how do we give people it's like you need to change your thought process to be able to go down the line like that. And
right. So if you do the right thought experiment, you basically start with, depending on who you're talking to, you say, okay, what are the decisions what are the actions that you are trying to influence? Like, literally, what actions are you trying to influence? Well, I'm trying to influence pricing. Okay, great. Pricing of what? Of the specific item, of a brand, of a whatever? Well, I don't know. Oh, well, let's talk about that some more. So let's understand, you're trying to, influence the pricing of whatever. Well, where? Oh, well, in these regions where we think that we have. Okay, so we're looking at these regions for this group of products. Okay. Now, realistically, do we have any price constraints? Is there map pricing already there? Like, which of these things do we actually have the opportunity to move? Well, oh, that's a good point. So actually, it's really just this. Okay, so we have this subgroup of products over here, and we can influence price, this, and this. And like, seasonal, this is a seasonal product. So really, like, we're not going to influence Q4 because that's going to be whatever. So we're really talking about Q1 and Q2. Right. Yeah. Okay. So what you wind up doing is saying, okay,
yeah,
we've redefined the box that we're playing in. Now we have a very targeted analysis that we know, depending on, that we can action on. We know that we can action on that.
And when you have those more specific questions, you're also setting up the stage to find out if you even have the data that could answer those questions.
Yes, great point. Absolutely true.
Because you could
Absolutely
say,
true.
yes, this is what I want, and this is what I need or want, now that you've gone through that dissection. But it's good, because if you don't, it's still, then you can decide, okay, I have a gap. How do I close the gap? Can I close the gap? Is it something that even exists? No. Okay, can it be created? Maybe. All right. And then you decide how to go forward. All right, well, if we don't have that, can we still use it to make our decision and take our action? Right. And so that gets down to the whole business of insights and decision making and listing assumptions, right? Because your assumptions might
Yes.
be limited. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's
So good,
yeah.
great point. That great point. Yeah.
So I think kind of just to sum that one up is what I heard you say. One is you have to be knowledgeable about the business to a certain extent, right? To
Yep.
do that, because the questions you asked were getting pretty detailed. But you also have to have a bit of a skill in that ability to question that way, to investigate, right? It's
Yep.
because those aren't the tell me what you want kind of questions. You're really trying to get inside somebody's head and unravel what maybe they think about but haven't ever articulated in how they might go about making a decision, right? They know what they're
Right.
doing, but they may never even have spoken it before.
Right. Right.
So you got to
Right.
kind of pull that out.
Yes. Yes.
So so it's kind of like being a therapist
It is
in some
very much
strange
like
way.
being a therapist. It is very much like being a therapist. A good sort of data analytics slash visualization setting is very much like, what are you trying to achieve in life? What are your strengths and weaknesses? What are the things you love about how your company does well? What are the things that need help? I mean, it really absolutely is therapy. It's absolutely true.
I think we're going to stop there because I feel like we're going to get very deep and zen
Very meta.
on,
Meta. We're
on
gonna get meta.
very meta on yeah, very meta on this topic. But we hit on, this was great. I think we got on some very actionable things that people can do. The biggest one, I think the theme that ran through this and kind of we looped all the way back was this notion of, really thinking about what's the outcome, whether you want to call it a goal, whether you want to call it something that's action, the decision you're going to make, and ultimately, what would you do? So I think it's great that we hit on those. I think those are some of the most critical things that we need to do which have nothing to do specifically with the data, with you know visualization tools or all these other things. It's cultural, almost cultural and people kind of things that we talked about today
Yep.
more than anything else, and that gets left out a lot. So I'm glad that our conversation hit on most of those kinds of ideas. So everybody, thanks very much. We'll post this up in a couple days. Also, please make sure to check out and register for the upcoming sessions. Got some more good guests on the way. Mike, again, thanks so much. Really appreciate your thoughts and see you down in Westfield soon.
Sounds good. My pleasure, Lee. Take care.
Bye bye.